House of Horror. Title: Tom Hanks and the Room That Remembered Him. I am Tom Hanks, and I am not supposed to remember what happened in room 417. But some places do not care about what you are supposed to forget. 1. The hotel brochure described the building as historic. That word has always bothered me. Historic is just a polite way of saying too old to fix properly. It means creaking pipes, uneven floors, and walls that have heard more than they should have. But the rate was cheap, the town was quiet, and I needed somewhere isolated to finish the manuscript that had been haunting me for months. So I checked in. The clerk never looked me in the eye. She slid the key across the counter with 2 fingers, as if touching it too much might be dangerous. 4th floor, she said. Room 417. Her voice dropped slightly when she said the number. I noticed. People always think you won't notice things if you don't comment on them. I smiled politely. 2. The elevator was out of order. Stairs only. The clerk said, already looking past me. I dragged my suitcase up 4 narrow flights, each step echoing too loudly in the empty stairwell. The carpet smelled damp, like it had been cleaned recently to remove something it could not fully forget. 4th floor. The hallway lights flickered, not dramatically, just enough to keep my eyes from relaxing. Doors lined the corridor, identical, evenly spaced. Except one. Room 417 sat slightly apart, closer to the emergency exit than the others. Its door was darker, the wood stained almost black. The number plate looked newer, as if it had been replaced. Or replaced often. I unlocked the door. It opened inward. The room was already cold. 3. At first glance, nothing was wrong. Queen-size bed, desk by the window, old television bolted to the wall, beige walls with framed landscape paintings, mountains, forests, places where people disappear. I dropped my suitcase and sat on the edge of the bed. That was when I noticed the silence. Not the absence of sound, the presence of it. The room felt padded, like a soundproof chamber. Even my breathing felt muted, swallowed before it could echo. I stood up and clapped once. The sound died instantly. No reverb, no return. I laughed nervously. Great acoustics, I muttered. The laugh did not sound like mine. 4. The first night passed without incident. Mostly, I dreamed of a hallway that stretched longer the more I walked. Doors without numbers. Walls that leaned inward. Someone whispering my name from behind a door I did not remember opening. I woke at 3:17 a.m., wide awake. The digital clock on the bedside table blinked once and reset itself. 3:17. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening. That was when I heard it, a chair scraping across the floor. Inside my room. 5. I sat up so fast my neck cracked. The desk chair was no longer tucked in. It stood in the middle of the room, facing the bed. My heart hammered. I was alone. I knew that. I had locked the door. I always locked doors. That habit came from something I didn't like to think about anymore. I stood slowly. Hello, I said. The chair moved, just an inch. The sound was soft, deliberate, like a response. I backed away until my calves hit the bed. No, he whispered. This isn't happening. The bathroom light flicked on. 6. I did not turn around. I could feel the doorway behind me, could sense the bathroom now glowing with fluorescent light. The mirror inside reflected something. I knew that without looking. A pressure filled the room, pushing inward, compressing my chest. Then a voice spoke, not from the bathroom, from behind the walls. Tom. It was my voice. Older, tired, accusing. I didn't say anything. I replied automatically. The walls creaked. The paintings rattled. The chair scraped again. Closer. 7. I ran. I didn't grab my suitcase. I didn't grab my phone. I yanked the door open and stumbled into the hallway. The lights were off. All of them. The emergency exit sign glowed red at the far end, bathing the corridor in a sickly hue. Doors lined the walls. Identical. Unnumbered. I turned back toward my room. There was number 417. Only a blank door. Smooth. Unmarked. Behind me, a door opened. Slowly. I felt breath on my neck. And something whispered, "You finally came back." I stood in the hallway, barefoot, heart slamming so hard against my ribs that I was certain the sound alone would give me away. Away to what? I didn't yet understand. The emergency exit sign flickered at the far end, its red glow stretching across the carpet like a wound that refused to close. The doors along the corridor were wrong. They weren't just unnumbered, they were identical, down to the scratches and dents, as if the hallway had been copied and pasted by something that understood structure but not meaning. Behind me, the door creaked wider. I did not turn around. Experience had taught me that some things gained strength for being acknowledged. Instead, I walked, slowly at first, then faster, my steps muffled by the thick carpet. Each door I passed seemed to lean toward me, with groaning softly, hinges whispering secrets I was not meant to hear. I reached the stairwell door and grabbed the handle. It did not budge. Locked. I tried again, harder. Nothing. The whisper came again, closer now. Tom. I spun around. The hallway was shorter. The emergency sign was gone, and every door was open. One. Inside the open rooms were not beds or desks or televisions. They were scenes, moments, frozen snapshots of lives paused at their worst possible instant. One room held a man slumped over a desk, pen still clutched in his hand, eyes wide and unfocused as if he had died mid-thought. Another showed a woman kneeling beside a bathtub filled with dark water, her reflection staring back at me instead of at herself. None of them moved, but all of them were aware. I could feel their attention on me like heat. What is this place? I whispered. A door at the far end of the hall closed. Slowly, deliberately, and I knew, without knowing how, that it was my door. Room 417. 2. The hallway rearranged itself as I moved. Turns appeared where there had been none. The carpet darkened, damp beneath my feet. The smell changed too. Less cleaning solution, more mildew and rust. I found myself standing in front of a large mirror mounted crookedly on the wall. My reflection stared back, but it did not mirror my movements. When I raised my hand, it hesitated. When I frowned, it smiled faintly. "You look tired," the reflection said. My voice, but calmer. "Older. I want to wake up," I said. The reflection shook its head slowly. "You already did. That's the problem." 3. A memory surfaced without warning. Not the dreamlike kind, the sharp, intrusive kind. I was 19 again, standing in the hallway of my childhood home. My parents were arguing in the kitchen, voices raised, brittle with years of unspoken resentment. I stood frozen, hand hovering over my bedroom door, listening. Always listening, never intervening. The reflection leaned closer to the glass. "That's when it learned you," it said softly. I swallowed. "What learned me?" "The room," it replied. "The first one." 4. The mirror shattered. Not violently, quietly, like a decision being finalized. The hallway collapsed inward, folding into darkness, and suddenly I was no longer standing. I was sitting in a chair, bolted to the floor, cold metal pressed against my wrists. Straps tightened. I screamed. The sound died before it reached the walls. I was back in room 417, but it wasn't the version I'd checked into. The furniture was gone. The walls were stripped down to raw wood, carved with symbols and words layered over one another in different handwriting. Names, dates, some crossed out, some unfinished. A single light bulb swung overhead, casting shadows that moved when I didn't. "You came back," a voice said from the corner. A man stepped into the light. He was about my age, or he had been once. His eyes were sunken, his skin stretched tight across his face like it had been pulled that way and left. "Who are you?" I demanded. He smiled weakly. "I was you," he said, "before you left." 5. My mind rebelled. "No," I said. "That's not possible." "That's what I said too," the man replied. "The room shows you what you avoid. Some people run. Some people stay. The room keeps the ones who try to forget." The straps around my wrists loosened slightly. Not enough to escape. Enough to feel hope. "Why me?" I asked. The man's smile faded. "Because you stayed once," he said. "And that made you interesting." 6. The walls began to shift. The carvings glowed faintly, pulsing like veins beneath skin. "I don't remember this place," I said. "That's the point," the man replied. "Room 417 doesn't take memories. It takes avoidance. It takes the parts of you that learned how to survive by disappearing." The light flickered. The room expanded. I saw other rooms bleeding into this one. Other chairs, other figures strapped down, all facing inward towards something I could not see. At the center of it all was a door. Unmarked. Breathing. 7. The man leaned closer. "You can still leave," he whispered, "but not the way you think." The door at the center creaked open. Darkness poured out, thick and heavy, carrying whispers layered so tightly they became a single sound. A demand. I felt pressure build in my chest, in my skull. The room was asking a question, not with words, with inevitability. "What will you stop running from?" I closed my eyes, and the room waited. The room did not rush me. That was the most terrifying part. The darkness behind the unmarked door breathed slowly, rhythmically, like a living thing at rest. The whispers softened into a low hum, patient and confident. The room knew time worked in its favor. Everyone broke eventually. I opened my eyes. The man who claimed he had once been me was watching closely, his expression tight with something that looked dangerously like hope. "What happens if I answer it wrong?" I asked. He exhaled through his nose. "There is no wrong answer, only incomplete ones." The straps around my wrists loosened again. The chair groaned. The room was listening. "1. I don't understand what you want from me," I said. The man stepped back, giving the door space, as if respecting its authority. "It doesn't want from you," he corrected. "It wants you, or what's left of you after you stop pretending." The carvings on the walls began to glow brighter, names surfacing from beneath other names. Layers peeled back, revealing decades of occupants. Some dates ended abruptly. Others trailed off, unfinished. "Most people don't even realize they're being hollowed out," the man continued. "They live their lives just fine, smiling, working, sleeping, and then one day they find a room that remembers the parts they abandoned." The door inhaled. I felt it in my lungs. 2. The room shifted again. The chair dissolved beneath me, and suddenly I was standing in a narrow hallway that smelled unmistakably like my childhood home. Cleaning solution, old wood, and something faintly metallic. I knew this hallway. I had grown up in it. My bedroom door stood to my left, my parents' room to the right. The kitchen light glowed faintly at the far end. Voices drifted toward me, arguing, not shouting, controlled, tired, the kind of argument that comes from years of choosing endurance over resolution. I stood there, frozen, just like I had all those years ago. Behind me, the man, the other me, appeared. "This is where it started," he said quietly. 3. I watched my younger self through the crack in the kitchen doorway. My father sat at the table, jaw clenched, fingers wrapped tightly around a coffee mug. My mother stood by the sink, her back rigid, her reflection fractured by the glass of the cabinet door. Neither of them noticed me. They never did. He never said anything. I murmured. The man nodded. "You learned early that silence kept the peace, or at least delayed the explosion." The scene warped. The kitchen faded, replaced by a classroom, then a workplace, then an apartment hallway. Different locations, same posture. Me, standing slightly apart, watching conflicts happen without stepping into them. "I thought I was being careful," I said. "You were being absent," the man replied gently. 4. The hallway twisted back into room 417. But now I could see it clearly. The room was not a trap. It was a collector. Every version of the room I'd seen, the hotel, the hallway, the chair, was just a skin stretched over the same truth. The room existed wherever avoidance had been practiced long enough to leave an imprint. "How many times have I been here?" I asked. The man hesitated, enough that it knows your name without asking. The unmarked door pulsed. A word formed in my mind uninvited. "Stay." 5. What happens if I stay? I asked. The man met my eyes. "You become like me," he said. "A remainder. A version that never left, never healed, never finished. And if I leave, you take responsibility," he replied. "For everything you didn't face. For everyone you disappointed by disappearing." The door creaked wider. Darkness spilled out, thick with memories I had deliberately dulled over the years. I took a step forward. The man reached out and grabbed my arm. "Listen to me," he said urgently. "Once you leave, the room won't stop looking for you. It will test you. It will recreate itself in smaller ways. Subtle ones. What? I asked. Because you don't belong to it anymore, he said, and it hates losing what it's learned. 6. The room began to shake. Names peeled off the walls and drifted through the air like ash. Faces formed briefly in the darkness beyond the door. Men and women caught in the exact moment they chose not to act. The whisper returned. Louder now. Not a demand. A promise. We can hold it for you. I felt my knees weaken. It would be so easy to let the room keep the weight. To walk away lighter. Unburdened. I'm tired, I admitted. The man smiled sadly. So was everyone else. 7. I pulled my arm free and stepped toward the door. The darkness surged. Cold wrapped around my ankles, climbing fast. I thought of every time I had stayed quiet to avoid discomfort. Every relationship that faded because I refused to speak honestly. Every moment I chose safety over truth. I'm done running, I said. The darkness recoiled. The room screamed. Not audibly, but structurally. The walls cracked. The carvings bled light. The door began to close. The man shouted, "Don't forget me." I turned back. "What happens to you?" He smiled, and for the first time, it was genuine. "I finish," he said. The door slammed shut. 8. I woke up on the floor of the hotel room. The normal one. Bed, desk, window. Morning light spilled across the carpet. My phone buzzed beside me. Dozens of missed calls. The digital clock read 7:12 a.m. I sat up slowly, heart racing. Room 417 was quiet. Ordinary, but I knew better. Because the silence no longer felt padded. It felt honest. And somewhere deep in the building, something shifted. Learning. Waiting. I checked out of the hotel at 8:03 a.m. The clerk avoided my eyes again, just as she had the night before. But this time, her hands trembled slightly as she took the key from me. "You slept?" she asked. It wasn't small talk. "Yes," I replied. Her shoulders sagged with visible relief. "That's good," she said quietly. "Most don't." I wanted to ask her what she meant. I wanted to ask how many people had checked in a room 417 and never truly checked out. But I didn't. Not this time. And as I stepped outside into the morning air, I felt something loosen inside me. Something old and tight finally unclenching. I thought it was over. I was wrong. 1. The room did not follow me immediately. That was intentional. For weeks, life felt sharper, clearer. Conversations no longer slid past me unfinished. When something bothered me, I said so. When something scared me, I didn't pretend it didn't. It was exhausting and honest. At night, I dreamed, but not of hallways or doors. I dreamed of arguments resolved, of words spoken when they mattered. I woke with a dull ache in my chest that felt earned. I began writing again. Not the safe kind of writing, not the kind that skirts the truth. I wrote about absence, about silence, about how people disappear while still standing in the room. The words came easily, too easily. 2. The first sign appeared in a coffee shop. I was sitting near the back, typing, when I noticed a door that hadn't been there before, tucked between the restroom and the storage area. Unmarked, dark wood, slightly warped inward. I stared at it for a long time. No fear, just recognition. When I looked again, it was gone. I packed up and left without finishing my drink. That night, I dreamed of the man from room 417, the version of me who had stayed. He stood on the other side of a closed door, his palm pressed flat against the wood. "I told you," he said calmly. "It recreates itself." 3. The doors multiplied, not physically, conceptually. A closed office door where a difficult conversation waited. A paused phone call I didn't return. A relationship hovering on the edge of honesty. Each time I hesitated, I felt it. That familiar pressure, like a room waiting to be remembered. The house, because I understood now that it was more than a room, was adapting. It no longer needed walls or numbers. It only needed moments where avoidance tried to reclaim ground. And it was patient. 4. I received an email from a reader 3 months after my book was published. No subject line, just one sentence. "I think your room found me." My hands went cold. We exchanged messages. She described a motel off a state highway in Arizona. 4th floor, room without a number. A chair facing the bed. A silence that swallowed sound. I told her the truth, that the room feeds on what we refuse to face, that it offers relief in exchange for incompleteness, that leaving doesn't mean winning, it means carrying the weight consciously. Her last message read, "I don't think I'm strong enough." She never wrote again. 5. The guilt nearly broke me, but guilt, I had learned, was different from avoidance. Guilt could be carried. I started speaking publicly, not about the room directly, but about the habits that build it, the small daily acts of disappearance, the lies we tell ourselves about being fine. People listened. Some cried. Some walked out. Some sent letters describing doors they had seen. The house was still growing, but so was the resistance. 6. One night, years later, I stood in my own apartment hallway and noticed a door at the far end that hadn't been there before. Unmarked, breathing. The air grew heavy. I closed my eyes. "I see you," I said aloud. "But I'm staying." The pressure receded. The door faded. I sank to the floor, shaking, heart pounding. The house would always test me, but no longer own me. 7. I understand now. Room 417 was never a place. It was a question. A simple one. What are you willing to sit with? Pain doesn't disappear when you refuse to look at it. It builds rooms. It builds houses. And if you're not careful, it builds homes. I used to believe that survival meant distance. That if you put enough space between yourself and the things that hurt, they would eventually lose their shape. Fade. Become manageable memories instead of living wounds. Room 417 taught me how wrong I was. Distance doesn't weaken pain. It preserves it. 1. Years passed. The doors stopped appearing as often. Not because the house had given up, but because I had changed the conditions that allowed it to exist. I stopped delaying conversations that scared me. I stopped choosing politeness over honesty. I stopped pretending silence was the same thing as peace. The house hated that, but adapted. It always does. I began noticing patterns instead of doors. A coworker who suddenly avoided conflict at all costs. A neighbor who laughed through grief and never stopped moving. A friend who said, "I'm fine," so often it became a reflex. They carried rooms inside them. They just didn't know it yet. 2. The final test came quietly. No chodwa, no door. Just a phone call at 2:41 a.m. A number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. Almost. "Hello," I said. There was breathing on the other end. Slow, controlled, then a voice. Not mine, not the man from the room. A woman. "I found a place," she whispered, "and it knows my name." My chest tightened. "Where are you?" I asked. "A hotel," she replied. "I think it's the 4th floor." I closed my eyes. "It's not a hotel," I said carefully. "It's a question." Silence. Then, "What if I answer wrong?" "You won't," I said, "but you have to answer fully." Her breathing shook. "I don't want to stay," she said. "Then don't disappear," I replied. "Stay with what hurts. Stay awake. Stay honest." The line went dead. 3. I never heard from her again, but I didn't dream of her either. And that mattered, because the house does not let go quietly. It marks failures. It celebrates them. The absence of a dream meant one of two things. Either she had survived, or the house had found someone easier. 4. I understand the house now. It is not evil. It is efficient. It was built by generations of people who mistook avoidance for strength, who believed endurance meant silence, who thought staying quiet was the same as staying whole. The house is what happens when pain is stored instead of processed. It is architecture made of refusal, and it is very good at what it does. 5. One day, long after room 417 stopped appearing in my life, I walked past a construction site. A new building was going up. Concrete foundation, steel beams, raw and unfinished. I watched a worker hesitate before speaking to his supervisor. Watch him nod instead of disagree. Watch him swallow something important. For a moment, I felt it. That familiar pressure. That invitation. I stepped closer and said, "You should tell him." The worker looked startled, then relieved. He turned and spoke. The pressure vanished. 6. That is how the house is weakened. Not destroyed, just denied material. Because the truth the room never wanted anyone to realize is this. It only exists where people refuse to remain present with their own lives. It cannot survive honesty. It cannot anchor itself to courage. And it cannot build walls where someone chooses to stay. 7. If you ever find yourself standing in a place that feels too quiet, if the air feels padded, if the silence presses back when you breathe, ask yourself a simple question before you step inside. When I try not to feel, if you can answer that, truly answer it, then the door will not open. And if it already has, stay. Do not run. Rooms hate witnesses. 8. I am Tom Hanks, and I remember room 417. That is why I can no longer remember me. The end. Have a nice day.